All right. Hi. My name is Swati Shrestha. I am the head of college and career counseling at Woodstock School.
Hi, everybody. My name is Susanna McGlamory, high school counselor at the American International School, Chennai.
And hi, I'm Jamie Kanki. I'm with Concourse Global, which is an online platform. It's not a school.
So our topic this is so much louder. Our topic today is talking about building a college counseling curriculum from scratch. And I have to be completely honest that when I came to Woodstock, I was very lucky because I was not actually building from scratch. I was helping someone who had built it up from scratch, and then I helped her kind of boost it up even more. So I was super, super lucky in that regard. You want to hear me karaoke? We can do that later. Today's presentation, we're going to be kind of setting the scene and talking about what we are going to discuss today. We realized that when we were planning this session that there were a lot of things that this could encompass, and we kind of wanted to limit our scope a little bit because we only have an hour. And so we kind of wanted to limit the scope of what we were going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about a few challenges. So we're actually going to give you guys a little bit of work in groups to kind of talk about how you might tackle these challenges before we kind of talk about how, some of the suggestions that we've come up with. And so we're going to talk about solutions to these challenges. We're also going to try and make sure that we include modifications for those of us who are in one counselor schools or in schools where college counseling isn't even really a sort of formal office yet. So we want to make sure that we are talking about solutions to challenges at a lot of different levels in terms of where we are with our schools. Our goal for this session is that we want everybody to leave feeling that they have at least one kind of concrete idea that they're leaving with that they might be able to implement at their school for college counseling, for a college counseling curriculum. I kind of already did introductions, which is why I skipped that over. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is kind of setting the scene of what we are talking about today. So I'm going to pass it over to Jamie.
Thank you. Can I take the... This is actually one of my favorite exercises to do because, as Swati mentioned, when you're talking about starting something from scratch, it's easy for us to say, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but I don't have the budget for that. Or, oh yeah, that's a great idea, but my principal would never support that, or my school would never support that. So to sort of get us in the right frame of mind for this session, we're going to do a quick exercise where we decide, is this my responsibility or not? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of tasks. And just kind of quickly, we're going to raise our hands if we think, yes, this is my responsibility. And if you think it's not, we're going to leave that behind us for this session, okay? And then we're going to talk about things that are actually within our control. Sorry, guys, there's not enough seats in here. All right, so let's do the first one. Creating a welcoming, respectful, and safe space for my students to talk about their future. Who thinks this is your responsibility as a counselor? I would generally agree with that. Great, so we're off to a good start. We're all on the same page. Okay, how about your school curriculum, whether or not you're on an IB, an AP, an IGCSE, or the national curriculum? How many of you think that's your responsibility? Oh my gosh, I see a couple of wavering hands. Yeah, you have no control. Oh, it's not your job. There's this saying that I learned from Poland, which is not my circus, not my monkeys. I think you should all remember that. Okay, explaining your school's curriculum. How many of you think that might be part of your responsibility? Great, because it's important for university reps in particular to understand your school curriculum, to be able to understand and appreciate how hard your students work, right? So that is definitely something that you want to be your responsibility. How about external testing processes? You have no control. They don't have control. Sorry, Clay, wherever he's at. But this, yeah. Administering, okay, yes. If you're administering it, I get it. That's different. But how many tests are offered in your country or locally, or how often your students can get there? That's not something within your control. How about finding the perfect school for your student that gives full scholarships. Guys, I love you all for wanting to take on that responsibility. But we got to share this responsibility, don't we? With who? That's right. They are able. Right? Okay. Sure, and some are more capable than others, and we know that, and that's fine. But generally, this is not your job, not your circus. Providing information that's reliable and useful for your students and families to consider and draw conclusions from. Yes, let's enable them. Let's enable these people, right? And how about giving my students resources and guidance? This is our responsibility. Great. Okay. So now we're going to talk really quickly just about who we are and where we all come from, just so you have a little context about where this session is coming from.
So like I said before, I was really, really lucky to step into an office that kind of had already been building up a little bit. But my predecessor, Renee Bowling, some of you may know her, she started at Woodstock 8 years ago, and there was not a curriculum. She was trying to run around, finding ways to talk to her students. Every one-on-one conversation was, again, talking to students about it, like, okay, let's talk about regions, let's talk about, prioritizing every single individual conversation. So when I came in as a second counselor, we then had the time and the resources to talk about how can we best use us as a resource to kind of reach out to our students. And so my first year at Woodstock, we instituted a senior seminar. We're a boarding school, and so we would go down to dorms once a week and talk to students, sometimes in their pajamas. And we would say, let's talk about the regions of the world that you're applying to. Let's talk about budget. Let's talk about prioritizing. 2 years after that, that grew into a junior and senior seminar. So we were actually able to start talking with all students starting in grade 11. And we were really lucky. We were able to sweet talk our administration into giving us class time. It's wild, you guys. We got one class a week with these kids. And so we were able to have these conversations so far ahead of time that by the time we were having one-on-one conversations with them as seniors, we'd already talked to them about, prioritizing and regions and budgets. So we were actually having conversations about, okay, cool, let's start talking about your essays, the details of the application. It was amazing. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we implemented that. But yeah, that's kind of the context and the background that I'm coming from at Woodstock, is that we've been really lucky to have buy-in. But yeah, mostly it's been a lot of just kind of pushing forward. This is why this is important, you guys.
Thanks, Swati. My name's Susanna. I'm at AISD in Chennai. I've been there for 7 years. And when I first joined the school, there was an emerging counseling program. I'm a comprehensive counselor, so I do social emotional counseling, academic counseling, and college counseling as part of my responsibilities, as does my colleague Josiah, who's floating around at the conference too. And over the past few years, what we've done is really develop this program from grade 9 all the way up to grade 12, so that we can really start with our younger students to layer in some work that they can start doing in terms of research and understanding themselves, really looking at what their strengths are and what their interests are, and then in 10th grade really starting to look at careers and matching some of those things with their strengths and interests, and then layering in college prep work in grades 11 and 12. And we also do this through a workshop model. So our grade 9s have a class that's dedicated as part of their schedule for the first semester of high school to get all of this work started. And then our grades 10, 11, and 12s, we meet with once a month during a lunch session. And it's just become part of the culture of our school. We don't have to, wrangle kids in, and it's just part of the expectation, and we look forward to getting together to do this work. And we've really been able to get parents on board and university reps on board, and I'll talk with you a little bit about that later.
Okay, and I'm the oddball here who is not from a high school counselor. My name is Jamie. Like I said, I work for Concourse Global. My background is actually in university admissions. So I started at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, international admissions, and I moved to University of Bridgeport in Connecticut, and most recently at NYU at the School of Engineering. So my background is very, like I said, admissions focused, but I have since left the university and I now work for an ed tech company, which is called Concourse. And this is basically an online platform that was built to support high school counselors for free and helping their students during their search process. So our methodology is sort of a group advisor situation where you'll have several counselors sort of feeding you information about institutions around the world and different education systems and things that your students may not know to even think about. Maybe you don't even know these types of schools exist. And so it's very much sort of we call it the counseling squad internally, but we sort of create sort of your own counseling squad. So it's kind of a cool thing. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, is sort of how a support platform for high school counselors, in particular when you're lacking a budget or you need free resources, that's what we do.
Cool. So the first part of our session is actually going to be breaking you out into 4 different, or having you break out into groups to talk about one of 4 different topics that we will then cover later. The first topic is how to get your school on board. So if you were to tackle that topic, we would want you to think about how you could introduce college counseling as a concept to your school if that's not already a thing there, how you can get your teachers on board, how you can get your administrators on board, and how you can get decision makers on board. How to get your foot in that door to then sort of like wedge yourself through. The second topic is how to introduce holistic admissions. If that's something that is not already, widely known at your school, I know at my school, even though we've been sending students to universities that practice holistic admission for years, we still have teachers who are from the UK or New Zealand or, areas that just, it's a completely foreign concept, literally, and we kind of have to onboard teachers. So how do we do that? The third is how to create a safe space for difficult conversations. I'm sure we all know as counselors that the college admission process is fraught with anxiety for our students. So how can we include ways to counsel, if we don't have the luxury of one-on-one meetings, how can we counsel groups and classes to be inclusive and mindful, not just for themselves, but sort of for their whole cohort. And the last thing is how to support outliers. I've definitely been in a position where a student walks into my office and says, I want to study architecture in the Czech Republic. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's research that together. So how do we support these students who want to do things that are not necessarily the norm within our schools? So how we're going to do this is we're going to divide you up into groups. And each, we're not going to make you move around. That sounds like a nightmare. And we're going to assign you one of these 4 topics. And we would like you to then report back think about 3 to 5 ideas. And we're going to kind of try to get those ideas back from you, to harvest those ideas. For each of your ideas, please include at least 1 modification, something that someone could do on their own if they were a solo counselor. So it's great, if you have a team, but let's kind of make sure that we're being inclusive here. So for those of you in rows, I'm going to start there. Does that seem reasonable? Yeah, so for those of you in rows, I'm just going to 1, topic 2, topic 3, topic 4, topic 1, topic 2, 3, 4, topic 1, 2, 3, 4. If all of you could talk together. 1 in the back. And then, let's say, I'm just going to point generally. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. And if you could just find a group maybe of 3 to 5 people and talk about that topic. We're going to give you 3 to 5 minutes. 3 to 5 is our favorite number right now. Focus. Do it. You got this.
Okay, you have 2 minutes. We're giving you 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Make sure you have your ideas.
Hello? Okay. If I could get your attention back. Hello? If we could have your attention back. I hope you had good group conversations. We're going to go through each of these 4 topics one by one. And as we do, we're going to elicit your responses so that we can learn from you and we can all learn from each other during this session. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about is how to get your school on board. So what are some of your ideas on how to get your school on board with college counseling?
Hello, this is Lavanya from Chennai, Velamal Global School. Okay, so I'm how to get your school on board. First thing is when we have academic starting of the year, where in our school we don't have exclusively counseling office. Okay, it's like ongoing process for us. So first thing is I would like to get the data from the parents. So at the start of the academic year, anyhow we will be conveying the orientation program. So one of the slides will be like a questionnaire or suggestion slide where we ask for the parents who are interested to go for abroad studies and who are in need of help. So that collectively we take that data, the first thing. And end of the orientation we give a feedback form. So in that one line is included who was going to opt for so many exams or who is going to opt for universities and which countries. So with that data, we'll take to the director, CEO. So with this data, we convince our director that with the counseling office setup, it's also in marketing where we can pull in more of admissions to our schools as well. Because from right through your academic, from your KG and you're landing up to university colleges and the internships and you're settling in your life. When a school does it, so where it's like a salt in a complete food, that's the counseling part. So when that is convinced to a director, obviously he will be ready to give you a counseling office setup. So that's what, that's how we can get on board.
I love it. Data is my best friend. I love it. Any other ideas on how to get your school on board from other groups? Yeah. Couple hands in the back.
Yeah, I come from one of the oldest residential schools in the country, the Lawrence School Lovedale. So when I started looking at a career development center, I tapped into the alumni. You know, they didn't have something like this. So the minute I wrote to them, they were willing to fund any amount of money to set up something of this sorts. And today, for the 5th year, it runs completely with their money. So there is a batch which has come forward and said, anything that the Career Development Center would like to have, we will fund it. So that's one way of looking at it.
Can we all have your alumni?
My school doesn't do it, but my college does. I'm from IIT Madras, now Chennai. And we do a lot of work at the pan world, like potatoes, the IITians are everywhere. And we do a lot of work. Similarly, I think we do help. The alumni is a great help, yes.
Thank you, guys. So those are definitely two of the points that I was going to bring up, which I'm pretty excited about. So the first thing is, I think, first, articulating a vision that supports your school's goals. So first, kind of thinking about what is the mission of your school, and how can you explain to the school board that the work that you do is supporting that mission? So kind of articulating a vision for your college counseling office. So kind of starting really, really broad, right? What do you want to do? So kind of have dreams, have these big, big dreams. How are you going to act as a resource to the school? How can you be a team player with all of the other offices on campus? And once you've kind of thought about those dreams, narrow it down a little bit. What are some of your goals, your long-term and short-term goals as a college counselor? And also think about kind of your ideal distribution of time and effort. So I mentioned that before I came to Woodstock, we were spending a lot of time one-on-one with students kind of explaining the same thing over and over, which is not necessarily the best use of a counselor's time. So think about what is your ideal distribution of time, and then think about what you could live with, right? Because we're not going to get all of our dreams and hopes, unfortunately. But what can we live with? What is something that is kind of a good next step? A way that you can do that in terms of tracking your time is this time assessment. So this is from ASCA, the American School Counselors Association. There's also ISCA, the International School Counselors Association. And this is a great tool to just kind of help you track what you do with your day. How many of you sit down in your office, if you have an office, and then all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and you're like, what have I done all day? There were so many students, there were so many things, I don't even know. With a time tracker, you can kind of track 15 minutes by 15 minutes. What were you doing all day? So that when your school board asks, what do you do all day, right? Because, I don't know, I have students who are like, oh, you just sit in your office waiting for students to come to you, right? No, I have other things that I do too. So these are the other things. Track what you do so that when someone says, what do you do in your office all day? You know exactly what you've been doing all day. Use your data. Data is your best friend all the time, always, in my opinion. So yeah, these are some of the things in terms of direct, indirect student services, program management, and then non-school counseling tasks. So show your people what you do, and then show them what you want to be doing, right? The second thing is consider the resources already available, which we talked about, right? So alumni are a fantastic resource. If they say, we wish we had this, use that information to tell your school board, listen, the people that were graduating have said that they want this. If you can add a percentage to that, even better. Sorry, looking up my notes. Think about if you have, teachers who are interested in helping you, right? We don't have to be these sort of one-person teams. If there are other people who are interested, get them on board. Something that we do at Woodstock is we have student interns so that we can, when we're having college fairs or visitors on campus, it's a kind of a win-win situation. The representatives get to meet with the student gets to meet with a rep, and that means that we are not necessarily using our time as school counselors, spending all of this time with representatives. I love spending time with representatives, but I want to make sure that they're meeting with the students, and I want to make sure that I'm meeting with the students. The students are kind of our central interest point, and so that's kind of a really great way to use the resources that you have. If students can meet the representatives, walk them to your office, show them around, give them a tour, use your students. They're amazing. If you have librarians, staff spouses, alumni, college representatives, all of these people, right, can be a part of your counseling squad. In terms of time, I know that time is a really valuable resource. It is hard to get people to buy into, well, I need to talk to everybody. at once. So at Woodstock, we started small. We started with, so we have homerooms once a week where, all of 9th grade gets together and talks about 9th grade things. 10th grade gets together and talks about 10th grade things. And so we would ask for like 2 to 5 minutes of their time during homeroom. So not all of homeroom, but can you give us a little bit of time to make announcements, to talk about things, right? Like I said, wedge your foot in that door and then make that door even wider. In terms of space, so I don't know if all of you are familiar with where Woodstock is. We're in Missouri. We're basically on the side of a mountain. There's not a lot of space where we live. And so think creatively about what's available to you. So how we've thought creatively is we offer lunchtime visits, which I know is not, the university representative's favorite, but it does mean that we have a space available where all students are going to see that representative and they're going to say, oh yeah, so-and-so is here today, let's talk to them. It's kind of making them visible front and center. I actually recently did something this year where I had representatives visiting during tea time. It was only 15 minutes, but it was right in the hallway where the students have their tea. So I was like, hey, these universities are here and they are literally right here, and they're only here for 20 minutes. Go talk to them. And all the kids were like, oh, okay, let's go. So use your space creatively with what you already have available. If you don't have an office, find other spaces. Are there classrooms that are empty at certain periods? Are there, do you have better weather than Missouri sometimes and you can use the outside? We can't use the outside right now. It's just rain and clouds. And then using networks that are available to you. So IC3 is an incredible network, right? Use the resources that are available to you. Ask questions. Another amazing resource for me has been the International Association of College Admission Counselors, and then ISCA, which I mentioned before. So like if you have other people who are having the same problems, reach out to them. See if you can put your brains together and come up with a solution. That's kind of been my greatest, I live up on a mountain. I'm physically isolated from a lot of other schools, but through digital means, because we live in the age of the internet, I can reach out to people through Facebook and ask questions. I was just telling them I do that sometimes when my students are in the room, go on Facebook and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, asking questions of my colleagues, obviously. So use the resources that are available to you. Data is your best friend, as I already mentioned. So documenting your time, tracking your outcomes. If you don't have the resources to have a software that does that, use Google Suites, right? Like use what you have available to you. But we track, right, the applications where our students are applying, where they end up going, and we look at that by region so that we know where we need to develop our own knowledge. If we have an increase in students going to Europe and I know nothing about Europe, I'm not being particularly helpful to my students. But then I can show that data to my administration and say, I need to learn more about Europe. Here's an opportunity for me to do so. Here's the data that backs up the fact that I need to learn more about this because here's where our students are going. And you can also, so using kind of pre and post assessments as well to determine value, so kind of asking students, what do you feel like you need? And then later on, so we do an exit survey every year where we ask students, how do you feel? Well, there's a lot of questions, but the essential gist of it is, how helpful do you think college counseling has been to you? And using that data, I've been able to show to our board that we are a valuable resource for our students. Tell us, well, the majority of them do, that we're helping them figure out what their next step is post-Woodstock. So get that data that backs that up so that you can show that you're a valuable resource on your campus. And then the last thing, sorry, not the last thing. The next is educating your board about best practice. So look around at what other schools are doing, right? Other schools, especially in your region, and that's definitely something that we do at Woodstock, is we say, well, these other schools have these resources, and this is kind of what they're doing. This is best practice in our region. So if you show that you're not, that this isn't unusual, this is something that other schools are able to implement, use that information and use that data to kind of show them that this is kind of what is normal in this profession. Toot your own horn. Make sure that, while it is nice to just do your work and say, I don't have to be recognized. No, you do. We're all doing important work, and no one else is going to toot your horn for you, so you might as well do it and say, look, I got these kids into these, best fit colleges. Here's the things I've been doing. Make sure that everybody knows what a good job you're doing, because then they will say, awesome, let's give this person more resources and more time and more space and all of that. Share your wins. Share, when a kid gets into a college that they're really excited about, tell everybody about it. When you're getting representatives from regions that don't normally visit your school or your region, tell people about it. Advertise it widely so that everybody knows. Yeah, I think it's really, really important to toot your own horn. I think that's not something that we commonly think about, but if you're a one-person office, you got to do it. And then get what you want. Remember that the goal is to get what you can live with, right? We've got these big dreams, but then what can you live with? Start small and work up from there. So I think, think about what is attainable, get those things and build up from there, and hopefully that works. So set yourself checkpoints, right, of small goals. We all, I'm sure, have heard about SMART goals or told our students about SMART goals. They're specific, measurable, attainable. What's R? Realistic and time-bound. I never remember all 5, thank you. But set yourself SMART goals, right? And then make sure you're actually reaching them, and then set yourself more goals so that you can show the progress that you're making. And the last bit of advice that my former supervisor had for me was be a person your boss is eager to say yes to, right? Be a team player so that when you're asking for things, they're like, yeah, that sounds like something that we can do. We all love to hear that. All right. Oh, sorry. We did.
Okay, so the second group, some folks talked a bit about how to introduce holistic admissions to colleagues. Were there some folks who talked about that in the room? Anybody have some ideas come up in your small groups about that you'd be willing to share? Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing that. So it's really some education in your community. So really onboarding the stakeholders in your community so that they understand what this is. So I can go here because that's exactly what you just said. Thank you. You saw my slide really quick. So really, when we're thinking about how to introduce holistic admissions to colleagues and really onboard our group, it's a lot about making sure people understand what we're talking about. And your example was perfect. We have to help people understand how this is different than other admissions process. And many of us went through holistic admissions processes to get into college, and many of us didn't. And many of the parents with whom we're working may not know what this is. And many of our colleagues might not either. So really getting into some of the nitty-gritty of the vocabulary, what does this actually mean? What will they be looking at? And how this might impact our students so that this is common vocabulary that we can talk about within our school and encourage our stakeholders to really talk about this process with our students. What other ideas came up? Anybody else willing to share something different? Ways to introduce this to the community? All right, so in the interest of time, I'll keep going. So our community can be a great asset. So this doesn't just go for introducing holistic admissions to our colleagues. This really goes for the whole process. We have a whole community in this room of people that we could tap into. So looking around, most of us are red tag people. And many of us are living and working in the same cities and we don't know each other. Or we're just a couple of hours away from each other. So we have this wonderful community that we can tap into in terms of asking questions about how we might do this. But in our own communities, we have resources of people who may be willing to do educational workshops with our colleagues or with our parents. So EdUSA is a great resource. Concourse is a great resource. It's a digital resource, but Jamie will talk a little bit about this in a little bit. She's got tons of stuff to share with you. Tap into those people. College, university reps are trying to get into your schools. They want to meet with your students. They're active. They're at this conference because they want our students from India, right? So use them wisely. instead of just having them set up in the cafeteria, you could even have them do a workshop on what is holistic admissions. Invite your teachers. Ask the college reps to stay after school for a teacher meeting and invite teachers who might be interested to come to that workshop. Have them present about essay writing, about how to write a good letter of recommendation. So use those people wisely. They love doing that, right? That for them, that's a nice break for them from giving the spiel about just about their college or university. And they're very happy to talk globally about the process. So tap into that resource. The other thing is you may have faculty members who have experience with this themselves, or parents in your community who have experience with this. Tap into those folks as well. Alum. See who can be on your counseling squad, okay? So really your community can be a great resource. And then I really recommend including your students. So our students have incredible ideas about how to share this information with teachers. I don't know about you guys, but at my school, my students often think that they know how to do everything better than everybody else, right? So, well, I would have done it this way. Well, my teacher did it this way, but like they should have done it this way. The students would have really liked it better. So let's ask them, right? So we are trying to educate our community about holistic admissions. What would be the best ways to do that? Let's ask our kids that question. They will have lots of ideas. Last year, we collected a lot of data from our students about our counseling program. Every time we met with them, they were getting sick of our surveys. And we did a focus group with our students, and they gave us tremendous ideas about how we can make our work more public in the community. That was a big thing that came out of it, was that the counseling department was doing really cool stuff, but not everybody knew about it. That not even the teachers knew all the good work that we were doing. So publicizing that work and educating colleagues about this process in maybe more subtle ways, right? So if you have a student bulletin that teachers have to read, you could have little blips that you put into your student bulletin. Have students do some presentations on this at various events that you have to educate your community. So you can really tap into those resources. There's actually, I think, a workshop with this title, which cracked me up, and it's happening right now. I didn't know that when I made this slide. But a big thing that has to be part of that conversation when you're talking with colleagues and families about holistic admissions is really helping them make the paradigm shift away from rankings and status to best fit. And that's a really complex conversation to have, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort. How many people have that struggle in their community where families are only interested in the rankings, and that's a huge part of the conversation, even if their child might not have the marks or might not even be the right program? This is ongoing. This is part of, I think, the world of college counselors. We're always going to be up against this and kind of grappling with this in our conversations with our colleagues and with families. And what we really need is to get our colleagues on board in that conversation, because they may unknowingly sabotage work that you're doing with families and students. Just by dropping in a comment about rankings, right? It reinforces that that's the most important thing. If your math teacher said, you should really think about this school, it's the top rank, whatever, right? Not that there's anything wrong with schools that are top rank, but we could get into that's a whole other workshop, right, about rankings. So really having intentional conversations with your colleagues about this idea of best fit and really making that a focus in your curriculum. And Jamie, I think, will talk about that a little bit with Concourse and the work that they do. But changing that conversation. How do you report data? So if you're getting your school on board by sharing information with families and board members and colleagues through data, think about what data you're sharing. So I've been in an ongoing, I don't want to call it a battle, but dialogue with my head of school about why are we sharing how many students in our school got into the top U.S. News and World Report schools. Like, why is that important to us? Does that have anything to do with the mission of our school? And does it also not exclude all of the students at our school who don't apply to schools in the U.S.? What is the data that we're reporting and sharing? How do we account for our students who are going to art school, who are brilliant artists? How do we account for our students who are going to community college because that might be the best fit and the best way in for them, or to a foundation program in the UK. So we don't want to exclude our students and say one thing is better than the other, and we can shape the data. So that's something I just want to plant that seed for you to think about. What am I sharing? How might I change the conversation with what I'm sharing? And how can I do that with my colleagues and my leadership at my school? And this takes time and it takes education. And I encourage us as colleagues in the counseling community to continue having this conversation because it benefits our kids. Yeah.
Can you please give an example of the kind of data that you would use that would reflect more of that paradigm shift to holistic admissions?
We started to collect data about best fit with our students, so asking intentional questions of our kids about where in the world they're applying, why they were applying to the places that they were applying, which I think also really helped support our students' thinking in terms of best fit, and then report some of that data back to our board. Right? So our students are applying to this many countries. They're applying to these types of schools, so liberal arts schools, for example, or research universities, and not even mentioning the rankings. My head of school and I are still in a little bit of a struggle, but I've at least gotten him away from U.S. News and World Report. Now he's on Times Higher Ed because that's global. And so we're still talking about it, right? And he actually agrees with me, but our board wants that information. And so we're taking these baby steps of, okay, what else can we share? We started pushing out individual student profiles and publicizing them. So for an example, and I gotta move on, but we had a student who she could have gone to Cambridge, one of the big, schools that's really tough to get into. She's a French kid, grew up in India, and she decided that she really wanted to stay in India. And she went to a fantastic liberal arts university in India. That is nowhere in the rankings. And that was like an interesting thing. And we're like, let's push out her story. She's the perfect example, right? She defied kind of what everybody thought she should do for the best fit for her. And so we interviewed her, we had her story, and we publicized that out. We shared that with the board. So that is just one example, and I'd be happy to talk more with you about it offline. I'm going to pass it to Swati.
Sorry. So our next topic is talking about safe spaces for difficult conversations. If you don't mind, in the interest of time, I'm just going to kind of move into the topic that we kind of have set up. So this is something that I think about every year because when we teach classes, I'll put up a list of schools and say, what do they have in common? And the students will say, well, they're not very good schools. And I'll say, that's a terrible thing to say. You have classmates who are applying to these schools. Why would you say that? And then the list of schools that I put up is they're all actually very highly selective. And they're like, but I've never heard of them. Yeah, because there's 4,000 institutions of education in the United States alone. Of course you haven't heard of it. But it does mean that we have to sort of set up our students for having these difficult conversations, right? Of recognizing that while they are going through these anxieties on their own, that they are not the only ones in their class, and everybody has different worries and different concerns. And my issue is always with students who maybe don't have the budget to study abroad, or don't necessarily have the same choices available to them, and how we make sure that we're being inclusive in our spaces. So the first thing is setting clear expectations. I don't know if any of you have ever talked to me about rankings, but I think rankings are garbage. I'm just going to put it out there. And so I make that very clear in my conversations with students that if that's something that's a priority for them, that's great, but let's talk about what other priorities they have as well, right? Because the rankings don't know who they are, so they should not be basing their entire life identity around them. And so, kind of making it kind of an obvious, yes, let's talk about liberal arts colleges and let's talk about research universities, but let's also talk about community colleges and foundation years, right? Set clear expectations so that students see all of these options as the legitimate options that they are. Kindness counts. I'm constantly reminding students to be kind to one another, to be mindful of the conversations that they're having during lunch or whatever, right? You don't know every person's situation, so if you're denigrating something, you might be denigrating something that is someone else's only choice, right? And that's not a nice feeling. And so when we make that clear to our students that you might be saying something that is hurtful to your best friend, right? You might not know their situation, but I think as the adults in the room, it's important for us to remind them kind of repeatedly to kind of be kind to one another as they're going through this process together. Using a roadmap, so a tool that we use in our senior seminar classes at the beginning of the 12th grade, I literally just did this last week, we do a needs assessment with our students. We ask them what their hopes are for their senior year, we ask them what their fears are for their senior year, and we ask them what they feel like they need in order to graduate well from Woodstock. And we have 3 little note cards that we ask them to fill out, and then we tabulate everything. It takes a lot of time, so if you are a one-person show, this is not necessarily the greatest tool, but you might be able to set up something that's kind of like a Google form where you kind of pre-fill in and you ask them to choose, and then it tabulates it for you, and you can put in it's just kind of an idea of what you might be able to do, but we kind of do it where we ask them to write down everything, and then I create a spreadsheet because that's who I am. And I tabulate everything and I make graphs and I show it to the students and I show it to the teachers of this is kind of where you are, right? And you're not alone in this hope or this fear. You're not alone in this need. And then we use the needs to actually shape our senior seminar. So if a lot of them say, I need to know how to handle my finances. I'm going to be on my own next year and I have no idea how to do a budget. We might create a lesson out of that and kind of teach them. These are kind of the basics. So senior seminar is kind of applying to college, but also let's think about how we can make sure you're going to be like a functional human being when you leave. So a needs assessment can help you with that to kind of figure out, okay, what can I do to make sure that my lessons are useful for my students? It can also help you steer conversations. I had a student this year who said, so I told them all it was anonymous, and I had a student who said, can I put my name on it so that you know what my fears and concerns are? And I was like, yeah, go crazy. And so if you have students like that, you can use that to steer one-on-one conversations you might have. And if at all possible, try and have one-on-one conversations because that's kind of where you can get to the meat of what a student's priorities are, what their budget is, how you can help them best. And I know that in some cases that is not possible for all of your students. But that is kind of, once you've had those group conversations, if you can encourage students to come find you, I think that can be really valuable, but obviously that's not always possible. But at the very least, I would say once you kind of know your class, pinpoint the students who might need your attention the most because so often, right, the squeakiest wheel gets the grease, and we want to make sure that we're being intentional about, well, I know this student has a very low budget and they have, high aspirations. Let me talk to them so I can make sure that they're kind of getting the attention that they might need. So it might be helpful for you to kind of just pinpoint which of these students do I feel like need a conversation one-on-one.
Okay, so also in the interest of time, we're gonna move ahead to talking about how we can support outliers in our classrooms. At any given class or grade level, you are undoubtedly going to have students who you're unsure how best to help, right? Maybe you've got a student with a learning disability, or maybe they're an extremely high flyer, and they're at a level that's unparalleled in your classroom, and you're not sure how best to help. Or maybe they want to be a shark biologist, and you don't know where to find elasmobronchology courses. I think that's actually what it is called, by the way. Or maybe they're looking for schools in the Netherlands or Estonia, like Swati was mentioning. And how do you best help them and help their families when they come to you and they ask you for options? And I think that one of the things to know is that it's okay and it's actually good to tell them if you don't know, and to make that a learning lesson that you go through with them and you show them how they should be researching for institutions and for different types of programs. So it can be easy to feel overwhelmed, and you might feel even bad that you don't know how best to assist your students, but we do want to sort of encourage you to show that you don't know it all, and we can't all know it all. And so that's why we talk a lot about finding your counseling squad. And you guys have a huge squad here at IC3, which is amazing. But as I mentioned earlier, I do want to just kind of tell you about some free resources that are available to you. And one of those things is Concourse, and that's the ed tech platform that we use, and that is free for you to use. And it's a great way to have other counselors like you sort of help you come up with ideas for your students. So if you have a student who's just really got a tough situation, putting your students on Concourse lets other advisors around the world say, hey, I know a program that might be a good fit for the student. And more than just putting a link up there, they actually explain why this program would be a good fit. And that's so important when you're talking to your parents, especially when you're having that rankings conversation, to explain, okay, I know rankings are really great, but here's why this program would be a good fit for your son or daughter. It's free for students and for high school counselors completely. There's no fees. Nope. Yep, that's why that's why we'll talk about it. But here, just to kind of give you a quick idea, when you get recommendations, and the same goes for when you're asking your friends and your colleagues and your counseling squad about ideas that they have, and they give you a link or they tell you you should look at a particular program, ask more. They should give you more. If you're talking to our university rep friends that are here, ask them why. Why is that a good program for this student? Or are you just giving me your, are you just, come to my school? There should be more. The conversation has to be more. You have to have a reason why, right? So this is just a couple of examples of what it looks like. We have the program information, and then we also give a specific rationale. The other thing, another resource that's really, really cool and helpful and new is called the Common College Counseling Curriculum, which is a total mouthful, but we're going to call it the C4. This website, also free, is built by counselors like you around the world, and it's essentially Wikipedia for high school counselors. And we've broken it up into countries. So we've got a number of countries. There's actually more countries now than when I took this screenshot that are listed. But if you click into any of them, we've broken it out by month. So you can see if you've got students who are looking at the Netherlands, or Canada in this case, what should they be looking at? What should they be doing in August and September? What deadlines do I need to be aware of in August and September if I've got a student looking to study in the Netherlands or in the UK? And underneath, you'll find a whole list of resources. And again, this is all created by you. You can go and create your own account and add your own knowledge here. And I really encourage you to, because as we build this community, it's a collegial community. That's why we're all so close, and that's what IC3 is about, is sharing our knowledge with one another and creating a community. So I encourage you to use this resource. It's free for you, and I encourage you to add your own, what you learn, add to it. And then you can be a contributor, and you're creating something really cool for the next generation of counselors down the line. We already sort of mentioned International ACAC, but this is a membership organization, and it does have a small fee for counselors, but it is an incredible resource to you. And while we're talking about it, Swati and I are actually on the scholar committee for International ACAC, and we will be opening, similar to IC3, we also have scholars that we fund fully to come from their country, from your country. We fly you in, we pay for the conference, for the pre-conference workshop, and then there's a pretty extensive university bus tour that happens after the conference. So if you are interested, small plug, if you are interested in applying for one of those scholar positions, and we have, it's competitive, I will tell you, leave us your business card so that Swati or I can make sure that you know. Yeah, write scholar on your business card so that we know, and we can reach out to you and let you know when the application's open, because it'll open, I think, in the next month or two, soon. So the school does not need to be a member. Nope. How long is the duration of the program? It's usually it'll be about 2 weeks total, because you'll come for about a week for the conference, and then you'll come for about a week for the bus tour afterwards. For a year, yes. Yes. So International ACAC, leave us your card, write scholar. Is it quick? Yeah. Membership. That's right. So even if you don't get in, if you're nominated, you'll get a 1 year. That's great. Good point. And then finally, and I think we've all sort of talked about this, but utilize your network. Be trading your business cards like crazy at this conference. Get people on WhatsApp. Make your own community within your small town, within your cities, within India overall. You guys should have a giant WhatsApp group that you can turn to for any questions at any time. So somebody admin that, somebody else, and utilize this community that you have here. I think that's it. We are here to chat just a bit after this, but thank you guys so much. It was wonderful. I hope that this was helpful. I know we threw a lot at you, but you were great. You were troopers. So thanks. And those of you sitting on the floor, you guys are real troopers. Thank you so much. You guys have a good rest of the conference.